Hi there, welcome to Ovulate and Dominate, your space to get real about energy, hormones, and the science behind thriving as a modern, ambitious woman as you are. I'm your host, Dr. Anastasia, pharmacist turned hormone strategist and certified life coach. Each week here, we dive deep into tools and truth you shouldn't have been taught about your body. No fluff, no shame, just real talk, expert insights, and practical strategies to help you take back control of your health and your life. So grab your matcha, your journal, or your earbuds on the walk, and let's get into it. In today's episode, we're going deep into why conventional lab ranges are failing women and how to read your labs like a hormone detective. We'll talk about the difference between functional and standard lab ranges, why so many women are being dismissed or misdiagnosed, what tests you really need to ask for, and what to do when your doctor says no. And yes, I'm sharing my own story too because I've been there. Right after I had my baby, I started feeling really off, not just tired, like deep bone exhaustion. I had waves of panic come over me out of nowhere. I ended up in the ER more than once, terrified something was seriously wrong with me. But when tests came back normal, ECG, they just handed me a prescription for antidepressants and told me it was all postpartum anxiety. I didn't get any hormone labs, no thyroid panel, no cortisol testing, just a pill and quick goodbye. I trusted them. I took the meds, but instead of getting better, I felt worse. So much worse. The side effects were horrible. I felt numb, foggy, and even more disconnected from myself and my baby. That was my rock bottom. And that's when something inside of me said, enough. If no one was going to advocate for me, I had to start advocating for myself. I needed answers, no more band-aids. That moment was the start of my journey into functional medicine. I began studying, training, and eventually specializing in women's hormone health because I never wanted another woman to feel the way I felt, ignored, dismissed, and in the dark. Here's what most people don't know. When doctors say something is normal on a lab test, that just means your number falls somewhere between the lowest and the highest results seen in a big group of people. But here's the problem with that. The people used to build those normal ranges include a lot of folks who are already unwell, people who are tired, inflamed, sedentary, or dealing with chronic illness. So if your results land somewhere in the middle of that group, you're called normal. But that doesn't mean you feel good. It doesn't mean your body is working the way it should. It just means you're not sick enough to raise a red flag. And honestly, most women don't want to just not be sick, right? We want to feel amazing. We want to feel like ourselves again. We want to be energized, balanced, confident, calm, and sharp. And that doesn't come from just falling inside a big, vague range. It comes from knowing what's optimal for you. Let me give you an example right here. One of the most common lab tests done is TSH, that's thyroid stimulating hormone. It's used to check your thyroid function, which affects your energy, metabolism, mood, digestion, periods, and much more. The typical lab range for TSH is about 0.5 to 4.5. If your number is 4.2, your doctor will probably say, looks great. But most women feel best when their TSH is somewhere between 1 and 2.5. So you could be within the normal range, but still feel exhausted, cold all the time, constipated, depressed, foggy, gaining weight even when you're eating clean. And your doctor might still send you home with a pat on the back and no answers. I can't tell you how many women I've talked to who've gone through this exact situation. They know their thyroid isn't working the way it used to, but because their labs are in range, they're told they're fine. Or take progesterone, for example. This hormone helps you feel calm, helps you sleep, reduce PMS, and it's super important for cycle balance and fertility. But most doctors don't even test for it unless you're actively trying to get pregnant. And if they do test it, they often don't tell you that timing matters. Progesterone only rises after you ovulate. If your test is too early in your cycle, it will look low, even if your body is doing the right thing. And if you test it too late, it may have already dropped. So if your doctor doesn't ask when your period started or where you are in your cycle, the results can be totally useless. I've had women tell me their doctor tested their hormones but didn't even ask what day of their cycle they were on. That's like checking the temperature outside, but forgetting to say what time of the day it was. You're missing the full picture. And this isn't just about hormones. Many doctors only test a handful of things, like basic thyroid numbers or maybe estrogen, and call it a day. But what about your cortisol, your insulin, your vitamin D, iron, your DHEA, your testosterone, your inflammation markers? Everything in your body is connected. One imbalance can throw off the whole system, and when you don't look at the full picture, you miss the real reason you feel off. I always say this is like going to a mechanic because your car is making weird noises and they check your tire pressure and say it looks good, and they hand you the key and send you off even though the engine is still rattling and the brakes are squeaking. That's what it's like when we only test a few things and ignore the rest. And you know what makes it even worse? Most of the medical system wasn't built with women in mind. Research was mostly done on men for decades. Lab ranges were built on male bodies or mixed data that doesn't take into account our cycles, our hormones, or how things shift through the months. A man's hormones stay relatively stable day to day. A woman's hormone rise and fall every single week. That alone changes how we feel, how we think, how we sleep, how we eat, how we react to stress. But the system doesn't account for this. So we're left with one-size-fits-all lab tests in a system that often treats our symptoms like mood swings or stress, instead of real signs of deeper imbalances. And if you're a mom, forget about it. It's even worse. You're told this is just what motherhood feels like. You're tired because you have kids. You're overwhelmed because that's part of parenting. You're gaining weight because your metabolism slows down. Or worse one, you're just getting older. Wear and tear, I was told. But the truth is, your body is not broken. You just haven't been given the right support. In the kind of care rooted in functional medicine and true hormone healing, we don't just look for normal, we look for optimal. We ask better questions. We test the right time of your cycle. We look at your labs and your lifestyle. We ask what your body is trying to tell you through your symptoms. We connect the dots so that your lab results finally make sense with how you actually feel. And when that happens, you stop feeling like you're crazy or dramatic or just too tired to function. You start feeling heard. You start feeling understood. And most importantly, you start feeling better. One of the biggest reasons women feel dismissed when they go to the doctor is something I call the gap between functional ranges and medical gaslighting. It's not just about what your labs say, it's about how those results are interpreted and how you treat it when you say, I don't feel okay. You walk into this exam room trusting that the person across from you is going to really listen, really look at what's going on inside of your body and give you answers. But what happens instead, more often than not, is that your labs come back normal based on the standard ranges. You get brushed off, not because your symptoms aren't real, but because those standard ranges are way too broad and outdated to catch what your body is truly experiencing. Let me explain in this way. There is a difference between being not sick and actually being well. Imagine going to a teacher and saying, I'm struggling with reading. And the teacher says, well, your test score is above failing, so you're fine. That doesn't help you read better, right? That doesn't address what you're going through. But that's exactly what happens in medicine when you say, I'm tired, I'm exhausted, my cycle is weird, I'm not myself. And the response is, well, your numbers are in range. That's not care. That's dismissal. That's medical gaslighting. It's when someone tells you directly or indirectly that's what you're experiencing isn't real just because they can't see it on a piece of paper. Functional medicine sees things differently. Instead of using massive reference ranges built from sick population, we use functional ranges, narrower, more specific numbers that reflect what helps the body function at its best. These numbers aren't just about avoiding disease, they're about supporting your energy, your hormones, your sleep, your mood, your metabolism, your life. Let's say you're low on iron. Not anemic, but low enough that you feel dizzy when you stand up. You bruise easily, you get heart palpitation, and your hair's thinning. If your ferritin, the iron storage, comes back at 15, most labs will say it's fine. But functionally, what we want the number to be at least 40 or 50 for you to feel really good. Same thing with vitamin D. You might be told your level's 30, normal, but women usually feel better with the levels between 50 and 70. These are not small differences. These are the exact reasons so many women are walking around exhausted and being told it's just life. And it's especially damaging when this kind of dismissal happens again and again and again. You start to question yourself. You wonder if you're just lazy or sensitive or maybe depressed. You might start believing that this is just how it's going to be now, like you're stuck in someone else's body and no one's taking the wheel. That's the part that hurts the most. Not just the symptoms, but the silence, the lack of acknowledgement. The way you keep getting told everything is fine when nothing about your life feels fine. This is why functional medicine and honestly, just truly listening to women matters so much. Because it's not about chasing perfect lab numbers. It's about helping you feel better in your real everyday life. It's about asking, what would help this woman wake up feeling like herself again? It's about understanding that optimal health isn't just the absence of disease. It's a presence of vitality. It's you having the energy to play with your kids, the confidence to show up at work, the clarity to make decisions, the calm to enjoy the evenings, the strength to move your body, and the peace to sleep through the night. You're not crazy. You're not making it up. You're not broken. Your body is talking. And if someone won't listen, it's time to find someone who will. And that's why I do what I do. Because old system might settle for normal, but we're not here for normal. We're here for better. We're here to tune in, trust our bodies, and take back our health. We're here to ovulate and dominate. When you start looking at your labs through the eyes of hormone detective, everything begins to make a little more sense. You stop just glancing at the numbers and thinking, okay, it's in range, I guess I'm fine. Instead, you start asking deeper questions. Is this number good enough to help me feel my best? Is it moving in the right direction? Is it matching how I feel the day to day? You don't need to be a doctor to do this. You just need too little guidance and the curiosity to understand your own body better. That curiosity is powerful. It's how healing begins. Let's say you get your thyroid labs back. Most women are told, we check your thyroid, it's normal, and that's the end of the story, right? But the truth is, there are several pieces to this thyroid puzzle, and each one tells you something slightly different. If you're only looking at the TSH, you're barely scratching the surface. That's like checking the gas light in your car without looking at the actual gas level or noticing how the car is driving. You need to look at the free T3, free T4, and thyroid antibodies to get the full picture. Free T3, this is mouthful, is the one that really tells you if your cells are getting the active thyroid hormone they need to give you energy and keep your metabolism running. If that number is low, you might be gaining weight, feeling sluggish, or losing your hair even if your TSH is totally normal. As a hormone detective, you should know to dig right there. Another common clue, your sex hormones. Let's say you're feeling super emotional. Your PMS is unbearable. You're not sleeping well. Your libido is gone and your cycle is either too short, too long, or MIA altogether. Those are not random symptoms, they're messages. Your estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, DHEA, they all give you clues. Estrogen might be too high, especially in relation to progesterone, which is why you feel so overwhelmed, bloated, or moody right before your period. But if no one checks these levels at the right time in your cycle, or worse, doesn't check them at all, you're just left guessing. A hormone detective knows that timing matters. For most women, hormone testing should happen about a week after ovulation, which is usually day 19 to 21 in a typical 28 cycle. So let's talk about cortisol for a second, because stress is huge. If you're always tired but wired, can't sleep through the night, or crash every afternoon around 3 p.m., cortisol is probably involved. It's your stress hormone, and it should follow a certain rhythm: high in the morning to wake you up, lower in the evening to help you wind down. But modern life, with all its pressure and demands, often throws the rhythm off. If your cortisol is flat all day, you feel like you're dragging yourself through life. If it's too high at night, you'll feel anxious and restless. A simple saliva or dried urine test can show you this pattern, and you don't want just know what the cortisol is in the moment. You want to know when it's showing up and whether it's helping or hurting your energy and mood. Blood sugar and insulin also tells a story that often gets ignored. You might be told your glucose is fine, but no one checked your fasting insulin, the hormone that works behind the scenes to keep your blood sugar stable. High insulin can cause weight gain, cravings, fatigue after meals, and make it really hard to lose weight even if you're eating clean. If your insulin is high, it's a sign your body is working overtime to keep things stable, and that's not sustainable. When you see these numbers together, you can start making small changes to support your metabolism instead of fighting against it. Reading labs like a hormone detective isn't about finding something wrong. It's about finding out what your body needs to work better. It's about looking at the big picture, not just a single number. You might look at your labs and notice that your progesterone is low, your cortisol is all over the place, and your vitamin D is in the basement. Suddenly, your brain fog, anxiety, and weird periods don't feel random anymore. They make sense. And when things make sense, you feel less afraid and more in control. You stop thinking your body is broken and start realizing that your body is doing its best with what it has right now. It just needs support. This is the part no one teaches us growing up: how to speak the language of our own body, how to recognize when something is off before it becomes a crisis, how to trust that little voice inside that says something isn't right, and follow the feeling with facts. You're not looking for a diagnosis, you're looking for direction. And when you find it, it's empowering. You stop outsourcing your wellness, you stop feeling like you have to wait for someone else to say it's okay to care about your health. You become the expert of your own body. That's what being a hormone detective really means. It's not about knowing everything. It's about being curious, being present, and being willing to ask better questions. Because when you know what to look for, you stop settling for normal and start creating your own version of well. So now that you're starting to think like a hormone detective, you might be wondering, okay, but what labs should I actually be asking for? And that's a valid question. And honestly, it's one of the most important pieces of the whole journey, because the truth is, most of the time, women are not getting the full picture from their lab work. Either the right labs aren't being ordered, or they're not being interpreted in a way that actually helps you feel better. Let's start with the basics. First up is your thyroid. We talked about this little already, but it's worth repeating because it's so commonly overlooked. If your doctor only tests TSH, which is very common, you're not seeing the full story. TSH is like a manager of the factory yelling instructions, but what we really want to know is how the actual workers are doing. So you also need free T4 and free T3. Free T4 is a storage form. It shows you what's available. Free T3 is an active form. That's the one that actually gets into your cells and gives you energy, keeps your metabolism going, helps with mood and focus. If free T3 is low, you can feel exhausted, depressed, gain weight easily, and struggle with the brain fog, even if TSH looks totally fine. Finally, there are thyroid antibodies, TPO, which tell us if your body is attacking your thyroid. This might happen as well, even if other numbers are still in range. That's a red flag that something is brewing, and you deserve to know that early, not years and years later. Next, let's talk about sex hormones. These are big players when it comes to how you feel day to day. Your mood, sleep, energy, skin, hair, weight, cycle, all of it. The tricky part is that timing really matters, as I mentioned before. A lot of women get hormones tested at random points in their cycle and are told it's normal, but that doesn't tell us much. Ideally, you want to test around day 19 to 21 of your cycle if you're still getting one. That's about a week after ovulation, when hormone levels are supposed to be peaking. You want to look at estrogen, specifically estradiol, progesterone, testosterone, and DHEA. These give you insights into whether you're ovulating, whether your progesterone is strong enough to balance out estrogen, whether you have signs of estrogen dominance, or whether the testosterone is too low, which affects libido, confidence, and even muscle tone. For women who are perimenopausal or have irregular cycles, it can be a little bit trickier, but it still matters. Even if you're not cycling regularly, those hormones still are valuable clues. Cortisol is another one. Most doctors might just glance at a single morning cortisol blood test, and that's better than nothing, let's agree, but it's not full picture. Cortisol follows the rhythm. It should rise in the morning, slowly drop through the day, and be low at night so you can sleep. The best way to check the pattern is with a saliva or dried urine test that show how it changes over time. Morning, noon, afternoon, and evening. If your cortisol is high when it shouldn't be or too low all day, it affects everything. Your energy, cravings, weight, mood, even your periods. If you're constantly tired but can't fall asleep at night, or you feel panicked over little things, this could be a part of the story. Then there's insulin and blood sugar. Most women are told their glucose is fine, but no one checks fasting insulin, which is a huge miss. Insulin tells you how hard your body is working to keep blood sugar in check. If it's too high, that's often a sign of insulin resistance starting, even if your glucose is still in range. High insulin can make it nearly impossible to lose weight, especially around the belly. It also increases the risk of PCOS, fatigue, and even anxiety. If you're constantly craving sugar or crashing after meals, ask for fasting insulin alongside fasting glucose. And if you can, add hemoglobin A1C. That shows how your blood sugar has been doing over the last few months. And then there are nutrients that support hormone balance: vitamin D, magnesium, B12, and iron, including ferritin, which tells you the iron storage. This might seem small, but they're actually huge. Low vitamin D can make hormone issues worse, contributing to fatigue and mood swings and even mess with ovulation. Low ferritin can lead to hair loss, anxiety, and exhaustion, even if your basic iron levels looks fine. These are often brushed off as within range, but again, we care about optimal, not just technically normal. The bottom line is you deserve labs that match how you feel. You deserve the full picture. And yes, sometimes you'll have to advocate for it, but that's the part of stepping into your role as an expert of your body. And remember, you're not being difficult, you're not being dramatic by asking for a more complete set of labs. You're being wise. You're saying, I want to understand what's really going on so I can feel like myself again. That's powerful and brave. And when you finally get those labs back and start connecting the dots between how you feel and what the numbers are showing, that's when the healing really starts. That's when everything shifts, because suddenly you're not just surviving through your symptoms anymore, you're solving the mystery behind them. You're not just hoping it'll get better on its own, you're taking steps one by one to reclaim your health, your energy, and your life. Now, I know you might be thinking, this all sounds amazing, but what if my doctor just says no? What if they won't order these labs? What if they tell me everything's fine and they brush me off again and again? You're not alone. So many women come to me with stories like this. They go in with their symptoms, real symptoms like exhaustion, mood swings, hair loss, weight that won't budge, painful periods, brain fog, anxiety, you name it. And they get a pat on the back and are told your labs are normal. Maybe they get offered birth control, my pet peeve. Maybe they get told lose weight, take a multivitamin, drink more water, sleep a little bit more, just wait it out. Sometimes they're told flat out, this is just part of being a mom, or you just stressed. And even worse, sometimes they start believing it's all in their head. That's not okay. You have every right to want answers. You have every right to feel well. You're not being extra. You're not being difficult or too sensitive by pushing for deeper testing. You're being smart. You're being a good steward of your body. And if your doctor won't listen, you're allowed to find someone who will. Now, I'll be honest. Some traditional healthcare providers are simply not trained to look at labs from a functional perspective. That's not a personal failure on their part, but it does mean you may hit a wall if you try to get answers through the typical insurance-based route. Most of the time, they're looking for disease, not dysfunction. They're trained to spot emergencies and rule out really dangerous conditions, which is important, but that's different from supporting someone who is clearly not okay but doesn't yet meet the criteria for diagnosis. You're stuck in the gray area where you feel like you're falling apart but nothing technically shows up. That's where functional testing comes in. Functional testing is about finding out what's really going on under the surface. It's about asking, how is your body actually functioning day to day? Not just, are you sick, but are you well? And that's such a powerful shift, because when you finally start looking at the whole picture, not just the top layer, you can stop guessing, you can stop patching symptoms with band-aids, you can start addressing root causes. Thanks for tuning in to Ovulate and Dominate. If this episode hit home, send it to a friend or your partner, because everyone deserves to understand how their bodies actually work. Want more? Head to our free resources, lab testing, and my signature hormone reboot program. Until next time, stay sync and unstoppable.